Hi, everybody. This week we will transition to the other side of the Marxian coin, political economy of communication. With their focus on media institutions, economic structures, and politics, this should feel like a pretty significant shift from the subcultural, popular cultural studies we learned about last week. In essence, political economy of communication looks at the money trail and the power formations behind the media, rather than focusing on mediated content in terms of signs and symbols, like cultural studies, although it is admittedly difficult to divorce the two realms from one another. As you'll remember from week 3 in the Barron and Davis reading on the emergence of critical cultural studies of mass communication, political economists are interested in how processes of content production and distribution are economically and industrially constrained. As Barron and Davis note, political economists ask such questions as the following. Why do some forms of culture dominate primetime television schedules, whereas other forms are absent? Does audience taste alone explain those differences, or can other, less obvious reasons be linked to the interests of economic institutions? So for a refresher on the basics of political economy, please refer to the Barron and Davis chapter on the emergence of critical and cultural studies, pages 145 to 147. So with those reminders in mind and that foundation, this week we'll turn to an actual political economist. Dr. Vincent Mosco is Professor Emeritus of Sociology at Queen's University in Ontario, Canada. Mosco's definitive book on the political economy of communication is a go-to resource for those seeking to learn the history and fundamentals of the body of theory known as political economy of communication. This week you'll read a single chapter from Mosco's 2009 book, which focuses on a broad explanation of the field of political economy and its intellectual roots. So please read that reading first before watching any of this week's videos. So there are a few key definitions in political economy that I want to draw your attention to. So first, in the narrow sense, political economy is the study of the social relations, particularly the power relations, that mutually constitute the production, distribution, and consumption of resources, including communication resources, particularly mediated communication resources. Political economy is, according to Phil Graham, another political economist, the study of how values of all kinds are produced, distributed, exchanged, and consumed, the economic, how power is produced, distributed, exchanged, and exercised, the political, and how these aspects of the social world are related at any given place and time in history. Political economists ask how are power and wealth related, and how are these in turn connected to cultural and social life. The political economist of communication wants to know how all of these influence and are influenced by our systems of mass media, information, and entertainment. Like the Frankfurt School theorists and other critical theories, political economy scholars are concerned with history, the social totality, moral philosophy, and praxis. That is where theory meets scholarly practice. And so political economy scholars are concerned with who owns the media, because they believe media ownership influences what it is that's available for us to consume. If what is available for us to consume is limited by factors outside of our control, our values are therefore shaped by influences outside of our control. Just a quick aside, 2 ways that media companies and advertisers influence those values is via filter bubbles and clickbait. These are 2 contemporary examples that I wanted to bring to your attention. I encourage you to watch these 2 short TED Talks to learn more about how the content you see is shaped by the institutions that produce and distribute it. And I've provided links to these 2 TED Talks in the mini lecture content page. But in addition to the Mosco reading this week, I've asked you to watch the PBS News Magazine program Frontlines episode Generation Like. This episode aired 3 years ago, but it remains incredibly relevant today, and I think it will resonate for many of you. In the episode, journalist Daniel Rushkoff covers a number of themes that are relevant to political economy. So please consider this slide a bit of a watching guide for the episode. I will take a screenshot of this slide and also post it in the content page for the mini lecture so that you can have this at your fingertips. But here are a number of questions to think about as you watch. And these are sort of in order as the episode progresses. So what are companies doing to our kids through technology? What's the relationship between empowerment and social media? How do corporations get kids to engage with their brands? The Oreo example is a great one. What's the role of data and data collection in all of this? Why do kids think it's so important to be liked? What's the role of analytics? What does it mean that, quote, you are your own media company? And what would political economy theorists say about this? In what ways does the audience sell the product for the brands? And what about all of this is actually transparent? Finally, Rushkoff concludes by noting the pervasiveness of this value system. What's important about this remark from a political economy perspective? Again, this is the linkage between values and the institutions and the sort of behind the scenes corporations who own the media. And by the media, I mean all of the media in all of its varying iterations and forms. So as you read and watch the material this week, please consider the following questions. What do you think are the most compelling elements of a political economy of communication approach to media and communication? What connections can you make between cultural studies and political economies projects? How are they similar, if at all, and what are some of the key differences? How might a political economy approach be useful to you in better understanding the audiences, groups, and individuals with whom you come into contact?